Hello New World, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to explain everything you need to know to create your very own worm raid. I'll be using terms like Empower and Rend, so if you're unfamiliar with these buffs and debuffs, check out my previous video where I break down how they work. Before we jump in, a huge shout out to all my supporters, including Jamie and my newest fan club member, one of the best players I know in New World, Nayaro. It's always a blast playing with you guys, and thanks for the support. Now let's dive in. Some common questions I get all the time are: why keen awareness and not thrust damage for rapiers? Why do some raids use a great sword while others don't? What's up with the different bow skill trees? Why is the flail so important? I'm going to answer all these questions and more, so let's get started. This video will cover 3 approaches to finishing the raid: ranged stamina break, melee stamina break, and speedruns. Let's start with the team composition. You need a tank, light players, and the rest should be melees. The tank is usually a ranged player. You typically see worm tanks using muskets or bows for the most damage, but you can use any ranged weapon as long as it keeps aggro. A hatchet can also be a good secondary weapon for an extra life in case of an unfortunate situation. The rapier is useful for riposte against acid spits, and if you use the finisher, your main weapon will benefit from the base damage increase. The best weapons for light players are bows, but muskets also do the job. Pair these with damage boosting artifacts like Finisher or a Void Gauntlet for Oblivion Empower. What's crucial is that you have at least one player shooting acid balls. The 2 best ways to handle the acid balls are: musket. Shots pass through targets, so you can use shooter stance to fire quick shots, or benefit from the musket passives Quick Load and Tactical Reload. The other way is utilizing bow's penetrating rapid shot. You use refreshing penetrating shot and time it to hit all the acid balls at once, which will count as a kill for each ball and instantly refresh your skill. If you choose the bow, make sure only one player shoots the acid balls to keep the penetrating shot refreshed, otherwise you'll be in a big mess. Other light players can help with the stray acid balls. So, 3 or 4 light players. Ideally, you want more melee players since they do more damage. The tank can be one of the light players, and you can add 3 more players to focus on the damage. Can you have 4 dedicated light players and the tank focusing only on the boss? Absolutely. The goal is to complete the raid, so if you're more comfortable with that setup, then go for it. Now let's talk about the melee players. The first thing you need to do is hit Rend cap. The standard is 70%, but since the worm has a 50% resilience to Rend, you will need to hit 140. There are many ways to achieve that. You can use a hatchet, which gives you 20% with Rending Throw, a warhammer that applies 65% with Armor Breaker and the Sundering perks of Clear Out and Shockwave. The Void Gauntlet can apply 30% with Disintegrate, and many others. No matter what you choose, it will work. Just pick what suits your raid and make sure to use it effectively. Let's talk about damage. The worm doesn't move, has a back, and takes 1% extra thrust damage. This is the perfect environment for the rapier to shine. The rapier is the highest DPS weapon for PvE, so you want as many rapiers as possible. There are 2 ways to play the rapier: bleed and evade. Now you might be wondering, where does Tondo fit in? Well, it doesn't. If you check the bleed dots, you'll see that both Tondo and Flurry apply the same bleed. Since evade rapiers will be spamming Flurry, you'll always have a rapier bleed on the boss, which Keen Tondo benefits from. Depending on your composition, you'll have between 8 to 13 evade rapiers. This is enough to apply bleeds quickly, and bleed players can keep popping them. Can you have only 1 bleed rapier? Sure. Can you have none? That's fine too, but why not maximize the potential of your rapiers since you're already slotting them? As for healing, most of the time you'll be hitting and not getting hit. However, the healer will shine when Nephilims are close or during the Scorpion phase or some unlucky situations. The best way to benefit from the healer is to have a Void Gauntlet main weapon using Void Blade to melee attack, apply Rend stacks, and put Oblivion under the players. You should have at least 1 healer for your raid. This should be enough. Can you have 2 healers as a backup in case one dies? Yes. Can you have a VG healer and a dedicated healing only player? Sure. If it guarantees your survival, go for it. The goal is to complete the raid while having fun, and you'll see many iterations of team compositions. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Now let's talk about Empower. Being at Empower cap, which is 50%, or at least near it, is important to maximize your damage. The primary source of damage will be the Rapiers, so you'll want to focus on them. The Finisher artifact is the easiest weapon to acquire and use. It comes with Quintondo, Flourish, and a gem slot. To maximize your bleed dots, the best perks to use is Disdained Infliction. Now let's calculate the Empower. 7% from Honing Stones, 15% from Oblivion, and an additional Empower on gear from Omnidirectional Evade. The Flail can boost Empower from Leader of the Pack, which provides 10% Empower to all nearby members, and Arcane Vortex, which also provides another 10%. If you don't want to rely on the Vortex, since it doesn't have a 100% uptime, then you can still benefit from Leadership on Sword and Shield players, which also provides 10% Empower to group members. Remember that unlike the Flail passive that applies to all nearby raid members, this passive applies only to group members, so you need to have at least one Sword and Shield player in each Rapier group. That's why some players might opt for thrust damage on the rings and dungeons. But it's important to note that thrust damage only empowers your Rapier's thrust attacks, meaning it doesn't affect the bleeds. Since bleeds are the main source of damage for Rapier builds, relying on thrust damage won't optimize your overall damage output. Instead, it's better to focus on other sources of Empower, and once your Rapiers reach Empower cap, you can swap out your thrust damage for Keen Awareness. This will increase your crit chance, leading to more frequent critical hits. So more crits equal faster cooldown reductions, which means quicker skill rotations and more flurry hits. The result? Faster bleeds being applied and popped, and ultimately more damage. For the Scorpion phase, you have two approaches. Split into two groups, one for each Scorpion, or have someone kite the Scorpion while the rest of the team deals with the other, then come back to help with the first one. It's also important to assign one group to handle mining. You don't want all 20 players running around for mines. That's it. You now know how to organize your own raid. The most important part is having a clear vision of your goal. You don't need to stick to the meta or ideal composition. If your composition works and completes the raid, then you're achieving your goal. Some added defenses you might consider are strike protection and chitin paddings. Now let's talk about melee stamina phase. The approach for creating the raid in this phase is similar, with two key differences. First, melee weapons do more stamina damage than ranged weapons, which can make this phase go faster. However, surviving the downstairs phase is much more challenging because of the constant acid debuffs being applied to you. When you cleanse yourself upstairs, the acid debuff is gone, but downstairs, it's constantly being reapplied. To deal with this, use the Stalwart Firestorm Heart Rune. Since its effects only apply for a brief period, you'll want to have multiple players using it one after another, cleansing players while the healer focuses on healing them and they break the boss's stamina. The strategy is to gather all the melee players in one spot, whether it's middle, right, or left, and start using the heavy attacks while the caller calls out the kicks. This keeps the stamina damage focused and consistent. For melee players, aside from light players, they'll need a secondary melee weapon to help break the stamina. Warhammer and Greatsword are the best weapons to use for this, as they have strong stamina damage abilities or heavy attacks. Now another important point is the acid circles. Usually, you don't want any acid circles on the stairs since the players need to pass through that area. But since most players will need to head back to the boss at some point, you'll need to keep the middle area clear of acid circles. The way to do that is by killing the scorpions faster. Here's when you want to have an Offtank to kite one of the Nephilims until the scorpion phase, which will allow players to pick up the sword, apply Rend stacks on the scorpions, and kill them more quickly. This strategy also helps when splitting the groups. The tank will aggro one scorpion while the Offtank aggroes the other. The Offtank can either prepare the Nephilim by using the sword buff, lowering the stamina bar to a minimum so players can break him easily later, or they can kite the Nephilim around and complete the light mechanic before the phase ends. Either approach works. There isn't a specific weapon to break the stamina, so you can use a Rapier, an Ice Gauntlet, a Warhammer, or a Greatsword, and all of them work. You can be a lights player or a melee player. This role can even fit in the ranged stamina strategies to have faster scorpion phases. After mastering the first two approaches, you're probably looking for the next challenge, speedrunning the raid. With a well-organized team utilizing Rends and dots, plus a solid melee stamina strategy, you can already hit sub 6 minute times, especially if you're lucky with the attack patterns and can skip a scorpion phase. But what if you want to push it even further? What if your goal is to finish the raid in under 5 minutes? Or maybe even 4 minutes? Well, to achieve that, you'll need to take your coordination and execution to the next level. Let's break down what you need to do to make that happen. The core of speedrunning are dots and rends. The flail and sword and shield are the two most important weapons you rely on for this strategy, and here's why. We'll utilize the Vital Embrace passive from the flail, which extends the duration of dots by 7%. Next, we'll take advantage of the debilitating extension upgrade on the Arcane Eruption, which extends all status effects including debuffs like Rend by 30%. We'll also use the Sword and Shield's passive, one with the shield, which increases the duration of all debuffs by 5%. So what does all this mean? When you combine all these passives with the Disdained Infliction perk, which increases each player's dots by 5%, players only need to apply their dots and debuffs on the boss once. These effects will continue to be extended until the phase ends, allowing you to keep consistent damage output on the boss without the need to reapply them except for the start of each phase. Weapon choices for speedruns. This setup means that Warhammer, one of the lowest DPS weapons in the game, is not necessary as a main weapon. You'll probably already be using it as an offhand, so let one player apply the rends with the Warhammer and then switch to Rapier and stay on it. The same logic applies to Hatchet as an example. This allows you to reduce the number of rending rolls and focus more on Rapiers. Awesome, right? Now let's talk about dots. Applying dots efficiently. We want to apply all possible dots without losing damage, keeping them extended while pumping out as much damage as possible. Here's a list of all possible dots that can be applied on the worm. Let's dive into some of the most important things you need to know. Status effects from the same spell do not stack above the limit. If 2 or more of the same debuffs are applied, only the highest one will be counted. For example, if you're hit with 2 net shots, you'll only get 1 bleed. This applies to all debuffs and dots. Rune glasses and heart runes. Let's start with rune glasses. There are 6 possible elemental rune glasses. You want to have one of each spread among the players. Next up are heart runes. There are 7 heart runes that apply different dots. You might notice that Bile Bomb is mentioned 3 times and Firestorm twice. This is because each version of the Bile Bomb applies a different dot type, so they stack. The same goes for the normal Firestorm and the Stalwart one. Now let's talk about 3 key weapon skills that apply different dots. Skewer, Poison Shot, and Powder Burn. You'll notice that these are listed twice in the sheet. Why? Because the upgraded and non-upgraded versions of these skills apply different dots. For example, if you're hit by 2 skewers using the same skill tree, you get 1 stack of bleed. But if you're hit with 2 skewers from different skill trees, you get 2 stacks. This applies to Poison Shot and Powder Burn as well. Powder Burn upgrade is not mentioned here because it only procs on a headshot, and the worm does not have a head hitbox. Another skill that follows this pattern is Perforate. An upgraded Perforate applies a different rend stack than the non-upgraded one. Keep in mind that dots are based on your weapon damage, so you want to pair weapons with the rolls that benefit from their attribute distribution. For example, spears scale with strength and dexterity, so it could be paired with a rapier that goes up to 350 dex. However, it would be better to pair it with a hatchet or a sword and shield, both of which also use strength and dexterity. Finally, let's talk about attunements. Attunements are not dots. They are extra damage added to your attacks and have a 1.5 second cooldown. They do not stack from multiple sources, so you only want one of each on a different player. There are 4 attunements you can utilize for this. In PvE, melee players generally deal more damage than ranged players, so rapiers are typically a better choice than bows or muskets for maximum damage output. But what about your light players? Well, the key is that light players only need to do the mechanic once per phase, which means that 3 of them can go down to play melee, while one stays upstairs to handle the acid spits and shoot the acid balls. This keeps your melee players focused on damage while still maintaining control over the mechanics. Now let's talk about Rend. You want to have at least 140% Rend on your team to ensure maximum damage. When you split the players, make sure you have 70% Rend on each Scorpion, because the Scorpions have no resilience to Rend. That means that 70% Rend is the cap for them. This ensures that you're applying the full effect of Rend without any loss of damage. Now for the icing on the cake to push your damage even further. Carnelians. Use Punishing Carnelians on your armor and Pristine Carnelians on your jewelry. For the player upstairs handling acid spits, you'll want Sighted Carnelians on him. These Carnelians will boost your damage and make a difference for you. One more thing to keep in mind is the difference between aggro and taunt. A ranged tank will always have aggro on the boss, but how does the ranged tank keep taunting the boss? Well, they can't. That's where you need to have a melee tank. This player will stay on the opposite side of the melee players, timing their taunts one after another to keep the boss taunted at all times, and allowing the Carnelians to take effect and maximize your damage. Now that we have all the pieces, let's recap our strategy for speedruns. Have a Flail and SNS player to extend debuffs, reach Rend cap, which is 140%, apply all possible dots and extend them, and fill the rest of the spots with Rapiers. Sounds just about right. With this strategy, you'll able to push for those lightning fast times and complete the raid in record time. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the speedrun strategies helpful. If you have any suggestions to push the strategy even further, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any ideas that you have that could make it even faster. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Until the next time, IchBinAyoub.